Rome was the most powerful city on earth, filled with towering temples, roaring crowds, marble statues, and endless wealth flowing in from conquered lands. During the day, merchants shouted across busy markets while senators marched proudly through crowded streets. To outsiders, the city looked unstoppable, the center of civilization itself. But when the sun disappeared behind the hills and shadows covered the city, Rome transformed into something far more dangerous. Ordinary citizens locked their doors early, travelers rushed toward inns before darkness arrived, and many Romans quietly placed knives beneath their pillows before trying to sleep through another terrifying night. Inside a cramped Roman apartment, a father lay awake beside his family while distant screams echoed through the alley below. The room smelled of smoke, sweat, and damp wood. Thin walls allowed every sound from neighboring rooms to travel clearly through the darkness. Somewhere downstairs, two drunken men shouted insults at each other while glass shattered against stone streets outside. The father slowly reached beneath his pillow, gripping the handle of a small iron knife hidden there every night. He was not a soldier or a criminal. He was an ordinary Roman citizen who understood a simple truth: after sunset, nobody in Rome truly felt safe. The streets of ancient Rome became almost unrecognizable at night. Without electricity, entire neighborhoods disappeared into darkness lit only by weak oil lamps and pale moonlight reflecting across narrow stone roads. Shadows filled crowded alleyways between apartment buildings, leaning dangerously over the streets below. People walking alone after sunset moved quickly and quietly, avoiding eye contact with strangers. Every distant footstep sounded threatening. Every movement inside the darkness felt suspicious. Criminals understood these streets perfectly, using darkness as protection while searching for drunk travelers, isolated citizens, or unlocked homes where frightened families slept lightly beside hidden blades. Roman writers warned constantly about the dangers of walking through the city after dark. The poet Juvenal described nighttime Rome as chaotic, violent, and deeply unpredictable. Citizens feared robbery, assault, and random violence breaking out without warning in crowded streets. Drunken groups wandered between taverns, shouting loudly while gamblers argued over lost money beneath flickering torchlight. Sometimes fights ended with bruises. Other times they ended with blood spreading across ancient stone roads. Ordinary Romans knew that surviving nighttime often depended on avoiding attention completely. This fear shaped daily behavior across the city and convinced countless citizens to sleep armed every night. Most ordinary Romans lived inside apartment buildings called insulae, massive overcrowded structures packed tightly together across poorer districts of the city. These buildings were built quickly and cheaply to house growing populations flooding into Rome from across the empire. Families often rented single rooms barely large enough for sleeping and cooking. Thin wooden walls separated dozens of strangers living side by side without privacy. Residents heard arguments, coughing, crying bobbies, barking dogs, and drunken shouting throughout the night. Inside these crowded buildings, tensions grew constantly. Neighbors fought over noise, smoke, stolen food, unpaid debts, and insults that sometimes turned violent before sunrise. The apartment buildings themselves terrified residents almost as much as criminals did. Many insulae were unstable, poorly maintained, and dangerously overcrowded. Wealthy landlords cared more about profit than safety, forcing tenants into weak upper floors supported by old wooden beams and cracked stone walls. Some buildings leaned visibly over narrow streets below. Others collapsed without warning during storms or heavy winds. Romans living on upper floors climbed narrow staircases every night knowing disaster could strike while they slept. Many citizens feared waking beneath falling debris or becoming trapped inside collapsing structures with no safe escape from the darkness surrounding them. Fire was another nightmare haunting Rome after sunset. Cooking flames, oil lamps, and wooden apartment interiors created perfect conditions for deadly fires spreading rapidly through crowded neighborhoods. One overturned lamp could ignite an entire building within minutes. Smoke poured through narrow hallways while terrified families pushed desperately toward blocked staircases. Some residents screamed from upper windows, while flames climbed toward rooftops across connected buildings. Rome experienced fires constantly, especially in poorer districts where cramped apartments stood dangerously close together. Many citizens slept lightly because they feared waking too late, trapped inside burning buildings while chaos and panic swallowed the streets outside. Although Rome had night watchmen called vigils, they were far too few to protect a city holding more than 1 million people. Their duties included controlling fires, patrolling streets, and stopping criminal activity, but the city was simply too large and too chaotic. Many poor neighborhoods remained practically lawless after dark. Criminals understood exactly where patrols rarely appeared and used those areas freely. Citizens living in dangerous districts learned quickly that help might never arrive during emergencies. If someone forced open your apartment door at midnight, survival depended almost entirely on yourself. That harsh reality explains why small knives became common protection beside Roman beds. Violence surrounded Roman society so completely that many citizens considered carrying blades normal. Gladiator games filled giant arenas, with cheering crowds watching men kill each other publicly for entertainment. Executions took place before enormous audiences. Soldiers returned home from brutal military campaigns across the empire, carrying trauma and aggression into civilian life. Public punishments reminded citizens constantly how cruel Roman authority could become. Children grew up watching violence treated as spectacle rather than tragedy. Over time, fear and brutality became woven deeply into daily culture. Sleeping beside a weapon no longer seemed extreme in a world where bloodshed appeared almost everywhere. As darkness settled fully across the city, Rome revealed its true nature beneath the glory and marble beauty admired by the outside world. Behind every torchlit street stood fear, uncertainty, desperation, and hidden violence waiting silently in the shadows. Families prayed quietly before sleeping, while distant arguments echoed between crowded apartment walls. Some citizens trusted locks, others trusted household gods, many trusted only the knife hidden beneath their pillow. Because in ancient Rome, nighttime transformed the greatest city on earth into a place where ordinary people feared strangers, neighbors, fire, gangs, and even the darkness itself before finally closing their eyes to sleep. As night spread across Rome, taverns became louder and far more dangerous. Cheap wine flowed endlessly through crowded rooms filled with exhausted workers, gamblers, travelers, and violent men looking for trouble. Smoke from oil lamps mixed with sweat and spilled alcohol, while arguments erupted over gambling debts, insults, and politics. Drunken citizens stumbled back into narrow streets, carrying anger with them into the darkness outside. Many nighttime fights began inside taverns before spilling into alleyways where nobody could clearly see what was happening. Ordinary Romans avoided these places after dark whenever possible because a single wrong glance could quickly become deadly violence. Travelers entering Rome after sunset often experienced immediate fear. The city looked enormous and confusing in darkness, filled with unfamiliar streets twisting between crowded apartment buildings. Weak torchlight revealed only fragments of the road ahead, while distant voices echoed through hidden alleyways nearby. Visitors carrying money or luggage became obvious robbery targets for criminals searching for vulnerable strangers. Some travelers paid extra for armed escorts simply to move safely between districts at night. Others stayed hidden inside inns until sunrise rather than risk wandering through dangerous streets alone. In Rome, darkness transformed even simple travel into something unpredictable and deeply threatening for ordinary people. Criminal gangs controlled parts of Rome after sunset, especially in poorer neighborhoods where law enforcement rarely appeared. These groups robbed travelers, intimidated merchants, and attacked rivals openly beneath torchlight. Some gangs worked for powerful politicians who used violence to influence elections and silence enemies across the city. Citizens feared accidentally crossing paths with the wrong group while walking home at night. Even witnesses to street crimes stayed silent because speaking against violent gangs could bring deadly consequences later. Ordinary Romans understood that survival often depended on avoiding attention completely, which is why many families locked themselves indoors long before midnight arrived. Inside crowded apartment buildings, fear often came from neighbors rather than strangers outside. Thin walls and cramped living conditions created endless tension between residents forced to share tiny spaces together every day. Arguments over noise, water, rent payments, or stolen food sometimes continued late into the night. Angry voices echoed through dark hallways while frightened families listened silently behind locked doors. Some disputes turned violent suddenly, especially after drinking or gambling losses. Citizens sleeping inside these overcrowded buildings never fully relaxed because danger might come not from thieves outside the street, but from someone living only a few steps away. Many Roman citizens carried small blades daily as tools for eating, working, or self-defense. Knives were common objects throughout the empire, especially among poorer citizens unable to afford guards or protection. After sunset, these ordinary tools became weapons. Drunken arguments escalated quickly once blades appeared in crowded streets or taverns. Citizens walking alone often kept knives hidden beneath cloaks while moving through dangerous districts at night. Sleeping beside a blade felt natural in a society where violence could erupt suddenly without warning. For many Romans, a knife beneath the pillow represented preparation rather than aggression, a final defense against unpredictable danger. Political violence made Rome even more terrifying after dark. Powerful Roman elites regularly hired gangs and armed supporters to intimidate rivals or attack opponents across the city. During election periods, violence sometimes exploded openly in public streets. Armed groups marched through neighborhoods threatening citizens and controlling movement after sunset. One famous Roman politician named Clodius became notorious for using violent gangs to dominate parts of Rome politically. Ordinary citizens feared becoming trapped between rival groups fighting for power in the darkness. Even wealthy senators sometimes traveled with bodyguards because assassination and ambush remained constant threats inside the capital of the empire. The sounds of nighttime Rome made sleeping nearly impossible for many citizens. Heavy carts rattled loudly across stone streets while merchants shouted late into the evening outside crowded buildings. Dogs barked endlessly between alleyways filled with smoke and garbage. Drunken singers stumbled home from taverns, while arguments erupted suddenly beneath apartment windows. Bobbies cried through thin walls and exhausted workers coughed throughout the night, inside cramped rooms filled with dust and heat. Roman writers complained constantly about insomnia caused by endless urban noise. Every strange sound forced citizens awake, wondering whether danger, fire, or violence was moving closer through the darkness outside. Some Romans feared not criminals, but complete social collapse during the night. Food shortages happened regularly throughout the empire, especially during political instability or failed harvests. Hungry crowds became dangerous crowds. Riots occasionally exploded across markets when grain prices rose too high for poor citizens to survive. Wealthy Romans feared desperate mobs storming wealthy districts searching for food or money after dark. Poor citizens feared starvation just as much as violence. This constant economic instability created enormous pressure across Roman society. Many citizens slept lightly not only because of criminals, but because they feared the entire city could erupt into chaos without warning. Even wealthy Romans struggled to feel safe at night despite living inside larger homes protected by servants and guards. Burglars targeted expensive villas searching for gold, jewelry, and valuable objects hidden inside private rooms. Roman history is filled with stories of assassinations, betrayals, and poisonings occurring behind closed doors. Powerful men feared enemies constantly, including political rivals, ambitious family members, and even trusted servants moving silently through their homes after dark. Some wealthy citizens locked bedroom doors heavily while keeping armed guards nearby during the night. If emperors and senators feared sleeping peacefully, ordinary Romans had even more reason to sleep armed themselves. By midnight, Rome became a city of shadows, fear, and uncertainty hidden beneath fading torchlight. Citizens sleeping inside overcrowded apartments listened carefully to footsteps moving through hallways outside their rooms. Somewhere in the distance, men shouted drunkenly while smoke drifted above dark rooftops across the city. A mother pulled blankets closer around sleeping children, while her husband checked once more for the knife hidden beneath his pillow. In ancient Rome, nighttime never truly felt peaceful. The greatest city on earth transformed after sunset into a dangerous world where ordinary people trusted steel more than safety, and darkness itself became something deeply feared. For many Romans, the greatest fear at night was not robbery or gangs but fire. The city was packed with wooden apartment buildings standing dangerously close together across narrow streets filled with dry debris and crowded homes. Oil lamps flickered beside curtains, cooking fires burned late into the evening, and careless accidents happened constantly. A single overturned flame could spread through an entire building within minutes. Citizens sleeping inside upper floors feared waking to smoke filling hallways while terrified neighbors screamed somewhere below. In ancient Rome, people understood a terrifying truth. Once fire began spreading through the city after dark, survival depended mostly on luck. Inside the upper levels of crowded insulae, escape during fires became almost impossible. Staircases were narrow, poorly built, and often blocked by storage, furniture, or panicked residents pushing desperately toward exits. Smoke rose quickly through wooden corridors while children cried and families stumbled through darkness searching for safety. Some Romans tied cloth over their mouths while crawling across floors to avoid choking from smoke. Others became trapped behind locked doors as flames climbed rapidly through connected buildings outside. Witnesses described desperate people leaning from windows screaming for help while entire neighborhoods glowed orange beneath the night sky during massive fires sweeping through Rome. The Great Fire during Emperor Nero's reign became one of the most infamous disasters in Roman history. Flames consumed huge sections of the city, while frightened citizens fled through crowded streets carrying children, valuables, and whatever possessions they could save. Smoke covered Rome for days as buildings collapsed and entire districts disappeared beneath fire. Some people believed the disaster was accidental, while others suspected political conspiracy. Regardless of the truth, the fire revealed how fragile Rome really was beneath its powerful image. Ordinary citizens already feared nighttime fires constantly, and disasters like this only deepened the anxiety spreading across every crowded neighborhood after sunset. Even when fires did not erupt, Roman nights still felt physically dangerous because many apartment buildings were unstable. Landlords often built instantly, quickly, and cheaply to maximize profit while ignoring structural safety completely. Cracked walls, weak wooden supports, and overcrowded upper floors became common throughout poorer districts. Some residents reported hearing beams creaking loudly during storms or heavy winds late at night. Others feared sections of floors collapsing beneath sleeping families. Ancient writers described apartment buildings leaning dangerously over streets while frightened tenants prayed the structures would survive another night. Sleeping peacefully became difficult when your own home felt capable of killing you unexpectedly. Disease spread rapidly through Rome's overcrowded districts. especially after dark when smoke and foul air settled heavily between narrow streets. Garbage piled beside buildings while sewage flowed through public areas, attracting insects and rats across the city. Inside cramped apartments, families lived packed closely together without proper sanitation or ventilation. Coughing echoed constantly through hallways as illness moved easily from room to room. Many Romans feared falling asleep healthy and waking feverish beside dying relatives before sunrise. Without modern medicine, even small infections became life-threatening. Death surrounded everyday life so closely that nighttime often felt haunted by sickness, uncertainty, and constant anxiety about survival. Funeral processions moved regularly through Roman streets, reminding citizens constantly how fragile life truly was. Families carried bodies through crowded districts while mourners followed silently behind torchlit wagons during evening ceremonies. The smell of incense mixed with smoke drifting above dark alleyways while grieving voices echoed between apartment buildings. Children growing up in Rome witnessed death frequently from disease, violence, fires, executions, and war. This constant exposure changed how citizens viewed fear and mortality. Sleeping beside a knife did not seem strange in a world where death appeared suddenly and often without warning. Many Romans simply accepted danger as part of ordinary existence. Superstition filled Roman society, especially during nighttime when shadows covered the city and strange sounds echoed through dark streets. Many citizens believed ghosts wandered after sunset searching for the living. Others feared curses, evil spirits, or angry dead returning to haunt homes and families. Some Romans avoided certain streets completely after dark because rumors claimed murders or executions had left those places cursed forever. Families prayed quietly to household gods before sleeping while protective amulets hung beside doors and beds. In a city already filled with crime, death, and uncertainty, supernatural fears blended naturally into everyday life once darkness covered Rome completely. Parents feared constantly for their children growing up inside dangerous Roman neighborhoods. Young boys wandered crowded streets filled with criminals, drunk men, stray animals, and violent gangs moving through markets after dark. Families living inside poor districts worried children might disappear, become injured, or get caught inside riots and fires spreading through the city. At night, mothers often slept lightly beside young children, listening carefully for strange noises outside apartment doors. Fathers kept knives nearby not only to protect themselves, but to defend entire families sleeping helplessly in cramped rooms. Fear shaped parenting deeply inside ancient Rome because survival often felt uncertain from one night to the next. Roman soldiers returning from brutal military campaigns carried violence home with them into civilian life. Many had spent years fighting bloody wars across distant provinces filled with rebellion, execution, and death. After experiencing constant warfare, aggression followed some soldiers back into crowded urban neighborhoods across Rome itself. Taverns filled with armed veterans drinking heavily after dark sometimes became especially dangerous places for ordinary citizens. Violence inside Roman society did not appear suddenly from nowhere. It was reinforced constantly through military culture, public entertainment, and political brutality across the empire. Sleeping armed felt practical in a civilization where violence touched nearly every part of daily existence. As the night grew deeper, Rome became quieter but never truly peaceful. Smoke drifted above rooftops while distant footsteps echoed faintly through narrow alleyways beneath the moonlight. Inside crowded apartment buildings, exhausted citizens turned restlessly beneath thin blankets, listening to the endless sounds of the city around them. Some trusted locks and prayers. Others trusted only the blade hidden inches from their hands beneath worn pillows. Because in ancient Rome, darkness did not represent rest or safety. Darkness represented uncertainty, fear, and survival. Every citizen understood that before sunrise arrived, fire, violence, disease, or criminals could still enter their lives without warning. Modern people often imagine ancient Rome as a perfect civilization filled with disciplined soldiers, shining marble temples, and wise emperors ruling over a stable empire. But for ordinary citizens, daily life felt far less glorious. Most Romans never lived inside luxury villas or attended grand political ceremonies. They lived inside overcrowded apartments surrounded by smoke, noise, poverty, and constant uncertainty. The empire looked magnificent from a distance, while millions of citizens struggled simply to survive another difficult week inside the capital. At night, those struggles became impossible to ignore. Darkness revealed the fear hidden beneath Rome's image of power, wealth, and civilization admired throughout the ancient world. Roman society valued strength above almost everything else. Military victories earned glory, while weakness invited humiliation and danger. Boys grew up learning that survival required toughness, discipline, and readiness for violence whenever necessary. Public punishments reinforced these ideas constantly. Citizens watched criminals whipped, executed, or humiliated before cheering crowds gathered in public spaces. Gladiator games transformed death into entertainment, while arenas filled with spectators celebrating bloodshed openly. Over time, Violence stopped feeling shocking to many Romans because it surrounded them everywhere. Carrying weapons and sleeping armed felt natural inside a culture teaching citizens constantly that safety depended on strength rather than trust or protection from authority. Slavery shaped every part of Roman life and created deep fear beneath the surface of society. Wealthy families relied heavily on enslaved servants moving freely through private homes after dark. Some slaves cooked meals while others guarded doors, cleaned rooms, or slept near wealthy masters throughout the night. But Roman history included terrifying slave revolts that left lasting scars across the empire. Wealthy citizens feared rebellion constantly because they understood how much resentment existed beneath forced labor and brutal punishments. Some masters slept nervously knowing dozens of enslaved people surrounded them every evening. Trust became fragile in homes where power rested on fear, violence, and absolute control over others. Food shortages pushed Rome dangerously close to chaos many times throughout its history. The massive population depended heavily on grain shipments arriving constantly from distant provinces across the empire. When storms disrupted trade routes or political instability interrupted supplies, panic spread rapidly through crowded districts. Hungry citizens gathered angrily in markets demanding cheaper bread, while rumors spread through taverns and apartment buildings after sunset. Roman leaders understood that starving crowds could become violent crowds within hours. Riots sometimes exploded suddenly across the city as desperate citizens searched for food and blamed wealthy elites for their suffering. Nighttime during shortages felt especially tense because everyone feared unrest spreading through the street. Even religion inside Rome reflected the anxiety citizens carried daily. Families prayed constantly to household gods asking for protection against fire, disease, theft, and violence. Small shrines stood inside homes illuminated by flickering oil lamps during evening rituals before sleep. Some citizens believed angry spirits wandered through dark streets searching for vulnerable victims after midnight. Others trusted protective charms worn around the neck or hidden beneath clothing. Fear and superstition mixed naturally together inside a city where death appeared everywhere and danger felt unpredictable. When ordinary people cannot fully control the world around them, rituals and beliefs become powerful ways to create comfort before facing another uncertain night. Roman nights affected people psychologically in ways many modern viewers rarely consider. Citizens slept lightly because danger felt constant and unpredictable. Strange sounds immediately triggered fear because fires, thieves, and violence could erupt without warning. Over time, living inside permanent tension changes how human beings think and behave. People become suspicious, anxious, and emotionally exhausted even during peaceful moments. Many Romans likely experienced stress every night without understanding it fully. The knife beneath the pillow represented more than physical protection. It represented control inside an uncontrollable environment. Holding a weapon nearby helped citizens believe they still possessed some power against the chaos surrounding them after sunset. Despite all the danger, Rome never stopped moving. Every morning the city awakened once again beneath rising sunlight. Merchants reopened busy markets while bakers prepared fresh bread for crowded streets already filling with workers and travelers. Children played beside fountains while politicians argued publicly across forums packed with citizens discussing news and rumors. Bathhouses filled with conversation and laughter despite the fear haunting nighttime life only hours earlier. This ability to continue living despite constant danger may be the most remarkable part of ancient Rome. Citizens adapted slowly to violence and uncertainty until survival itself became ordinary routine repeated every single day throughout the empire. Many wealthy Romans eventually escaped the city whenever possible, building countryside villas far from overcrowded neighborhoods and dangerous nighttime streets. Outside Rome, life felt quieter, cleaner, and safer compared to the chaos inside the capital. Fresh air replaced smoke while open land replaced crowded apartment blocks leaning over filthy roads, but most citizens could never leave. The poor remained trapped inside the city working exhausting jobs while enduring noise, disease, and fear year after year. Every evening they returned home through dark streets knowing tomorrow would likely bring the same struggles again. For them, Rome was not simply glorious, it was exhausting, unpredictable, and deeply dangerous. The knife beneath the pillow became a symbol of ordinary survival across ancient Rome. It represented fear of thieves forcing open doors after midnight, fear of gangs moving through crowded alleys, fear of neighbors becoming violent during drunken arguments, fear of fires spreading silently through apartment buildings while families slept, fear of a world where help might never arrive in time. Ordinary Romans did not sleep armed because they wanted violence. They slept armed because the city taught them repeatedly that danger could appear without warning. In Rome, preparation often meant the difference between survival and becoming another forgotten victim lost somewhere inside the darkness. So when people imagine ancient Rome today, they should picture more than emperors, gladiators, and magnificent marble architecture. They should picture exhausted families lying awake inside cramped apartment rooms filled with smoke and distant noise echoing through the night outside. They should picture fathers quietly checking hidden knives before closing their eyes beside sleeping children. They should picture citizens listening nervously to footsteps moving through dark hallways while fires glowed somewhere far across the city skyline. Because behind all the power and glory of the Roman Empire existed a darker reality. Even the greatest city on earth feared what might happen after sunset.